I've had so many women say, I was listening to Can't Get Enough, and by chapter 3 or by the end of the book, I'd broken up with my boyfriend. And I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I'm not trying to break up happy homes.
Kennedy Ryan is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling author whose award-winning novels have made her one of the most powerful voices in contemporary romance.
My romance, what I do, I don't see it primarily as escaping from life. I see it as a portal into life. And what I mean by that is a reflection of what people are actually going through.
Her work doesn't shy away from the hard stuff and redefines what it means to write with truth and vulnerability.
There's no greater metric for success to me than impact. Like for me, that's a touchdown. That is the first and best metric of success.
Without further ado, welcome Kennedy to the studio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Do Tell Relationship Podcast. Today, we have the wonderful romance novelist Kennedy Ryan joining me for a really fun conversation. I have been traveling and out of practice for a couple of weeks, actually for maybe a couple of months now that I'm thinking of it. So this will be my first podcast back from vacation and wrapping up all the crazy school stuff for last year. And I feel like this is a really good episode to come back on because Kennedy I don't know if you know her. If you don't know her, you're going to get to know her really well. But she's such a ball of energy. She's such a light. And she is someone whose energy is just contagious. You'll learn a little bit more about what I'm talking about coming up here shortly when she joins me. One of the things that really drew me to her is her ability to make her characters on the page really, really evoke a real passion and inspiration to the reader. I think that for a romance novelist, a lot of the times everything is expected to be just very fluffy and romantic and lovey-dovey all the time. So her focus on creating real life characters with real life issues that are experiencing and going through so many of the same challenges that we're all experiencing in our everyday life. Her ability to do that and make us see ourselves in her characters and through her work, but still get like a lovey, fluffy feeling of happiness at the end of it. I think that's a real skill set that she has and why so many people love her work. I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it. Welcome, Kennedy, to the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you here and joining us on the Do Tell Relationship Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really, really excited to talk. So I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Are you, how's your summer been so far? Has everything, like, are you in summer mode or are you still like in work mode right now?
Definitely work mode. It's been a very intense summer. I've been on tour for my book. And so I was on tour for 3 weeks. So I was home maybe 12 hours and in like 3 weeks, maybe a couple of days and a few hours over the course of 3 weeks. Yeah. So I was in a different city every day for 2 weeks straight. So that's plane. But it was great. As a writer, like one of my favorite parts of the job is connecting with readers. And so when I'm on tour, I get to kind of see everybody and see the impact the book might be having and how people are responding to it. So it's been great. And now I'm on deadline. So I'm writing, it's always, right now it feels like I'm in a season where it's always something going on. But I am really, really hoping I get a vacation very soon.
Me too. I really hope that for you too. It's something, honestly, first of all, congratulations on all of your success. I mean, being busy and going from city to city to promote your book, I feel like for a writer, it just is like a sign and a symbol of success and the level of reach that you have. So congratulations on that. Nonetheless, it's still a lot of work, and I do acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a psychologist just yesterday, and we were talking about finding ways to celebrate the small wins and just to make sure that we're celebrating our goals, right?
Yeah.
And because I have a tendency to not take the time out to like pat myself on the back. And
Yeah.
she's like, you should create a list of goals over the course of all the hard work that you can take the time out and celebrate each goal. And you have to write down what the celebration will be for each milestone. And then that way you can kind of hold yourself accountable in celebrating the milestones and take a second to actually reflect on the progress and how far you've come, even though you're in the nitty gritty of it and it's
Yeah.
hard and you're only
Right.
at home for 12 hours.
You're absolutely right. And my husband is much better. I'm not a great celebrator. I am one of those people who it's like on to the next. You work really hard to accomplish something and then it's like, okay, I did it. What's next? That's kind of my mode. And my husband's always like, "Wait, babe, that's really big. Like we need to pause. We need to celebrate." The book that's out now, it made the New York Times list, which I mean, it's really tough, especially Anna, thank you. Um,
Congrats.
Especially for Black authors with the adult fiction list. I mean, there's maybe 4 or 5 of us over the last 5 years. Like it's really intense and it's very rare. And so I did it the last time with my last book and I was like, I don't know if it's going to happen again. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But you kind of work like for months and months and months to get to that place, and then it happens and you're like, okay, I got to go to I got to be somewhere else tonight because I was still on tour. And my husband's like, we should have a drink. We should celebrate. This was something that was a goal for you. This is a really big deal. So he's much better at resting than I am. He's better at celebrating. He's better at pausing. And so we kind of, I guess, balance each other out a little bit. He will force rest me and force celebrate me. So he goes
Well,
on tour with me and he takes care of me, which is really, really a blessing.
that's wonderful. I think it's so good to have someone like that in our lives that will help kind of like hold us accountable for rest and celebrating. I feel my husband is the same way. He's even so much so. One thing I'll never forget is that first of all, he has a birthday party every year for his birthday. And to me, that's bonkers. Like I've never had a party for my birthday. I don't think I've had one party, like an actual party, and my best friend from in high school threw me a surprise birthday party. Anyhow, long story. Let me try to reel it in here. I was 37 weeks pregnant with my twin girls, and my husband's birthday was that week, and he was like, I don't care. I want a party.
We need my
I'm
party.
turning 30 and I want a big party. And I was like, wow, okay. So we threw him his party. We danced. My girls came the next day.
Oh, I
So
love that. You jiggled them loose.
yeah, I know that's exactly what happened. And anyhow, he did not care that
No.
I was 37 weeks with twins. He's like, we're going to celebrate my birthday because I'm turning 30.
Yes.
Anyhow, he's
Yes.
a huge he's someone in my life who does the same for me. He wants to celebrate every moment because life is short and you just never know. And so taking the time out to just reap the benefits of all the hard work is so important.
Yes. I have a
Bef-
friend, her birthday was yesterday. Her birthday is July 1st. She celebrates the entire month of July. Every year, the entire month. I mean, she's up in New York. I'll go to New York and it'll be like the 20th. And she's like, where do you want to go for my birthday? And I'm like, wasn't it 3 weeks ago?
Wait,
She's like,
is
I have
she
until the 31st.
is she no, she's not a Leo.
No, what is this? July 1st. I'm not great with
I'm not
signs.
sure. I'm not great either. I just know my
I'm a
brother.
Libra. That's all I
You're a
know.
Libra?
I'm a Libra.
Okay, my brother and my dad are both Leos, and my brother is someone who also meets a birthday like at party every month. So I feel like maybe it's a July thing. I don't know. Before we get into our conversation,
Mhm.
we're gonna do this little segment that I call "Walk Away or Walk Through It."
Okay.
I like to call it like rapid fire, but I don't really care how long you
Okay.
take to answer. I just want you to share how you feel and what you think. And we're gonna get, it's kind of spicy, this one. I was going through the questions and it's a little spicy. I think that we really want your insight on all things relationships because you obviously are the person we need to be talking to about this.
Am I? Okay.
You are, you are. Okay, here we go. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, so a couple of years have passed and you realize you've been really, really active in a one-sided friendship.
Okay.
Walk away or walk through it.
You say I've been really active in a one-sided
You've been
friendship.
really active in a one-sided friendship.
Okay, I am usually on the other side of this question. I am usually the one people are like reaching out to, like, I'm still here. I haven't talked to you in weeks. So I'm going to say walk through because I am always asking for that grace from my
Yes,
friends
I
when
love
I
that.
kind of disappear. So I'm going to say walk through, but it depends on It depends. It definitely depends on circumstances because you don't want to be in a relationship or friendship that's toxic or that's somehow damaging your self-esteem or that's taking advantage of you. And I can say I'm not doing those things. I'm just busy and
Yes.
I forget to reach out. But I would say walk through. And I think of friendships and relationships as concentric. And what I mean by that is, you have it's circles, right? You have your tight inner circle. You have, the next circle out. Then you're down to like acquaintances. For that tight inner circle, for me is rare and precious. There's like maybe three women in that circle, And so that circle I would definitely walk through for, I wouldn't walk away from that lightly because we've been through so much together, because they know me so intimately and I know them that way. So that circle of friendship, it would take a lot for me to walk away from, unless it's blatantly obvious that it's harmful. But I can think of, friendships that weren't serving me, or that it wasn't a good situation that I've walked away from. Definitely, when that person proved harmful. Not even just harmful to me, but harmful to someone else.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've walked
No,
away.
I think it's really, you can really get a good grasp of people and by watching how they treat others.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's really important. And I think the other part of that is when first of all, we're all grown,
Yeah.
right? And we have friendships. People are busy. Like
Yes.
life is lifing. And that core group of friends, like there will be periods of time where where I'm at, I'm like struggling through life, trying to like
Yeah.
get from one place to the next. But I also love you so much to the moon and back. And I'll talk to you when I can
Right.
come up for air. And that's
Right.
okay. Like, I feel like that's like
Yes.
that's in a healthy adult relationship.
Absolutely. Yes. And
Okay.
the understanding that if I really need something, like, you're going to be there for me. Like,
Absolutely.
I can remember, I mentioned I was on tour. I can remember I was on tour and I had so much going on and they knew I was in a different airport every day. And one of those like inner circle friends was like, I know you have so much going on, da da da, but would you just whisper a prayer for me, today, because I'm going through this, and that's it. That's all I want. And I'm like, of course,
Done.
it's just that touch point of someone you trust and someone you rely on. And those friends they never make you feel guilty for when life is lifing.
Exactly. Okay. Very good. We'll move on to the next question. I feel like we covered so many of these questions. Okay, so here's a good one. You're healing You're evolving, and someone from your past wants to catch up. Walk away for the sake of your peace, or walk through it and see if there's room for reconnection.
I do think it depends on circumstances. I will say I am big on protecting my peace. I think especially when something clicked when I turned 40, and I moved into which I think sometimes is hard for us as women to do, but I moved into a put myself first space. Not that I neglect my kids or I neglect my husband or anything like that, but it's like, and also a like, I don't care what people think space. So there's kind of like there's a mode where I'm like, if this friendship isn't healthy, if you have damaged me in some way, if you hurt me in a way that we hurt each other, we're humans, we're not perfect. So over the course of years long friendships, sometimes we hurt each other, but sometimes there are patterns. And sometimes there are lines that you draw for yourself that if a person crosses, there's no going back from. So if it's one of those relationships, if it's one of those situations, I'm more likely to not try to reconnect because I have enough people in my life, you know. But if it's a situation where we've both healed, we've both evolved, because some things happen when you're really young, and years later people reach out, and you've both evolved, and you've both healed, and you've both grown. I'm a very different person now than I was even when I was 25 years old. So I would assess. And if that connection is worth fostering, then I would. But I have a t-shirt that says protect my edges, protect my peace. And I live by that, and I think I'm on social media a lot. My job puts me on social media a lot, and there are this is probably off topic, discursing, but my therapist at one point put me on a social media break because I was seeing so many things about myself. It's like the FYP, the algorithm is so smart. It delivers things to you about you. And something happened where I was like, oh, this job puts me in a space where I'm up for scrutiny and criticism, and people get on TikTok and they talk about you and they drag you for things that aren't even true. And I got into a place where I'm like, I really need to protect my peace. I don't even know those people for one. But it kind of has leaked over into other areas of my life where I'm just like, I'm going to protect my peace at all costs because I'm a better mom. I'm a better wife. I'm a better friend. I'm a better creative when I do that. So I tend to guard that space pretty closely. So
That makes a lot of sense. I think what happens when I would agree with you 100%. I feel like after I had children, there wasn't really an age for me. It's like once I had my kids, I just decided I don't have time for most things anymore.
the priorities shift.
Yeah, like I'm okay with letting a lot more go. But as far as reconnecting, I feel like time is so precious. And, bringing more people into the fold that I want to be showing up for, that I want to be a good friend to, and people that I want to be the best version of myself for. I mean, do I have the amount of time and energy necessary to do that? I don't know. We'll see. So I agree with you. There are a lot of things that kind of go into reconnecting and why and with whom. So it's a big layered question. That was fun. That was really simple and easy, right? Not too bad. Okay,
Yes,
good.
I can be really bad at rapid fire stuff. Like
You know what is so funny? I feel like 70% of the time, everyone says, "Oh my gosh, I'm the worst at rapid fire," and that's why we don't do rapid fire. Let's just have it. Let's just talk about it.
yes. And my mind goes blank. And I'm like,
Exactly. Exactly.
do I like Diet Coke or tea? I don't know.
Okay, so let's jump into this conversation because I want to hear more about your work. And obviously, we know how successful you are, but I feel like I really like to kind of get in there and learn a little bit more about the journey and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
things that inspire you,
Mhm,
and why and how you got into the profession or the
yeah.
career that you've chosen. And so before we get into your work and your new book, I want to hear about how you actually got here. I
Mm,
always find it interesting when I get a chance to speak to someone who's really been able to successfully carve their own path in an
mm.
industry like you have. So, what inspired you to become a writer?
You know, I decided really, really young that I was going to be a writer. So I just remember a fascination with words. And
Mm.
I think my mom was a big reader. And so she
Mm-hmm.
always encouraged me to read. And my father, he was in higher education. And he was, when I was young, he was a dean of students. And then later he was the president of a university. And he was gone a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
we would have, I wouldn't see him a lot, during the day. He was also in school getting his doctorate. So it was like, we didn't see him very much, but he would come home. He would assign, this is going to sound crazy. He would assign me letters of the dictionary. And he
Oh.
would say, just read these words, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to quiz you. And I know that sounds like that's not going to be fun. That's not going to be a father-daughter bonding moment. He would tell me, whenever you're reading a book, write down every word you don't know, find a way to use it in the next week, in conversation or whatever. And we would quiz each other on C. He would give me a C word. I would give him, that's maybe not the best example. He would give me a G word. I would give him a G. We would go back and forth until we stumped each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds, I know, nerdy, and it was nerdy. But early on, it just kind of fostered this love of words and of language. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember I found this box of poems, and they were like, radical, like fist in the air kind of poems. And I was like, Mom, who wrote these? She's like, your dad. And he was
Oh,
so like
wow.
buttoned up professor, dean of, it was so like different. It was a completely different side of him, poetry at all. And I just started kind of thinking, well, I'd like to see if I would like to write poetry. And I started out writing poetry really, really young.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say probably by the seventh or eighth grade, I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I did not think I was going to be writing fiction. I wanted to be a journalist, and that's what I went to school for. I was 17 years old, and I started writing for our local newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't in college yet. I don't even know why they let me do it. Different times. And I went on, to college, got my degree in journalism. And when I graduated, I was doing technical writing. I was writing for nonprofits like churches and nonprofit organizations. I was freelancing, all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I still wasn't thinking I'm going to be writing fiction. I honestly thought I was going to be reporting from a war torn country. And I'm always like, that's not a huge leap to writing romance, is it?
Mm-hmm.
It is. It actually is. I have just always loved language. And it wasn't until, my late 30s. I always loved reading romance when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of got away from it when I got to college. I started reading the serious books and, stuff that I needed to do for school. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't come back to romance until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. My son was diagnosed with autism. Now, this was like
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago. And that was a bit of a different diagnosis then, just because there weren't the resources, and it was a very different landscape. There wasn't insurance. We didn't know as much. And my son was diagnosed on a Thursday, and then the next day, my husband lost his job. And 20 years ago, and even, I mean, now, especially with the landscape we have, where we may be losing some Medicaid benefits and supports and insurance coverage, it was a devastating diagnosis financially, because so much came
Mm-hmm.
out of pocket. And my
Mm-hmm.
husband lost his job the next day. And that just kind of sent us into a bit of a spiral, because I didn't have an amazing job. I wasn't making a ton of money. And all of a sudden I was the sole breadwinner, and also dealing with this diagnosis we didn't know very much about, that was going to take a lot of money. And
Mm-hmm.
I just remember kind of going into a different mode, and a survival kind of mode. And out of that, I started a nonprofit for families who have children with autism. I ran it for like 11 years. And then
Wow.
I started writing around autism. I started writing around autism advocacy and support for families who have children with autism. So I'm writing for like, mom or parent kind of magazines, Chicken Soup for the Soul on autism. Everything was writing around special needs parenting. And I needed an escape. I needed something like that's just for me. And I went back to reading romance. And I remembered how much I loved it and why I loved it so much. And by then I had been a writer for professional writer for probably 12 years, and it had never occurred to me to write romance. And so
Wow.
that's kind of how I started thinking about it. It was for me primarily just having something for myself that I enjoyed, because there was so much that I was doing kind of for everyone else and in other spaces. So that's kind of how I got back to reading it, and then I kind of put two and two together and thought I'd give it a chance to write it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a like you said before, that's a really interesting journey. And for someone who has written countless novels,
Mhm.
and you've been in the industry for quite a while, and
Mhm.
you're very well known, you would never know that your journey had so many layers to it, like a lot of the characters in your stories, which we're going to get into. But it's always so interesting to see how people outline their path, because it's never really linear,
Right.
right? There's so many curves and changes and shifts and pivots that we kind of experience.
Right.
So that's really interesting. Do you remember, like, in a moment, like, can you pinpoint the moment where you were like, oh, I really enjoy this. It's an escape for me
Mhm.
to write about and read about romance.
Mhm.
What was the moment where you knew that you were going to start sharing your work with the world?
I I I think about the very first book I ever wrote, which it really surprises people that the very first book I ever wrote is Before I Let Go, which didn't release until November 2022, which is the
Mm-hmm.
first book of the Skyline series, which is really, I think, what introduced me to a lot more people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have been writing for a really long time, but I don't think that a lot of people don't even know that I have books beyond this series that they know of, which is the Skyline series. And they know, oh, it's being turned into a TV show. Like they know all of these things, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't know that like for 10 years before that, I was a self-published author. I was grinding as an
Mm-hmm.
indie author on my own, publishing for
Mm-hmm.
myself. And so for some people it feels kind of overnight, but for me it feels like a really long time. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
now I've been publishing fiction for like 14 years. And I remember, so the first book I ever wrote was actually Before I Let Go, even though it didn't publish till like 15 years later. And
Wow.
I remember I had actually discarded it because I thought it was just trash. And my husband, when I decided to traditionally publish, I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. My husband was like, "What about that divorce book?" Because Before I Let Go is the divorced couple. And I was like, "Oh, babe, that book is trash." I was just kind of playing around, literally to see if I could write a book. Like I remember, I don't know if I can pinpoint a moment. I can pinpoint a season where it just
Mm.
felt like there was so much going on that I couldn't control, and that was in a lot of spaces hard. And I
Mm.
wanted to use my writing to do something fun. And I was like, I don't even know if I can write a book. And so I'm just going
Mhm.
to try. And that book is Before I Let Go. I let my husband and my sister read it. That's all. They were like, "This is amazing." I was like, "Okay." And then I like shoved it under my bed and didn't think about it for 12 years.
Mhm.
So I remember just wanting to kind of stretch a little bit, because I was writing, like I said, I was freelancing. I was writing articles. I was writing around autism advocacy. I was running my foundation. And I kind of just wanted to stretch a little bit creatively. And so I wrote the book that is now Before I Let Go, shoved it under the bed. And then I remember my son, a lot of autistic kids are fascinated with water. And
Mhm.
so my son went through this phase where there was a river. I lived in Atlanta. We lived in Atlanta 20 years. Um, and there was a river and he loved it. And we would go to that river every day,
Mm-hmm.
every day. And my husband had gotten a job that where he was working at night. So it was just me and my son. And we would go to the
Mm-hmm.
river and I started, I don't know why, it's just your brain doing something, started thinking about like a town that sprouted up around a river. And a story started forming. Every day we would go to this same river, and the story just started forming in my head, forming in my head. And that became the actual first book that I published. It became the book that I pitched to an agent and to an editor. And that became my first book. I remember it being a season of my life where it was my son and I were spending a lot of time together. And it
Mm-hmm.
was it was really a precious season because
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't talking a lot. He's still only partially verbal, but he wasn't talking a lot. And he was having a lot of behavioral issues. And the only time it seemed like we could get this kid happy and like in a great space was when he was in water. And
Mm-hmm.
so every day I was like, we're going to the river. You're going to frolic, and give me some time.
Yes.
And so I remember, like, that's what I remember is I remember coming up with that first book during that season, taking him to the river every day, and writing a book kind of out of that experience.
Well, that leads me to my next question because one of the things that makes your books so different is the fact that it's not only centered around love, but
Mhm,
also these lived realities like grief, injustice, and
mhm,
mental health.
mhm.
So these themes aren't often aspects that we see
Yeah.
as escapists. So,
Yes.
what inspired you to take that road less traveled and kind of incorporate these real life experiences into your romance novels?
Yeah, when I first started writing, I just kind of like knee jerk wrote. Like I started writing what other people were writing. I was like, what is the industry responding to? Like it wasn't for me rooted in any kind of conviction.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if people know much about like strengths finders, personality, things like that. But like one of my core strengths is belief. And if you're a strengths finders person, it's like in my top three, which you don't always see or often see. And for those of it's exhausting, by the way, like
Mm-hmm.
because everything has to feel like it means something, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like belief is like the engine, conviction is the engine for everything you do. And I look up back over my life and I'm like, oh, okay. So when I started the foundation, it was out of belief, it was out of conviction, it was out of feeling like somehow something you do is going to change the world in some part.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, when I first started writing, kind of neglecting that aspect of myself and just doing what I saw other people doing. And after a few books, I was like, this feels really hollow. Like, I need to examine and interrogate why I'm writing what I'm writing and why it doesn't, even though I found some modest success, why it doesn't feel fulfilling for me. And I started
Wow.
really like interrogating that and asking like this big question, why am I even writing?
Mm-hmm.
And when I started doing that, like what is the space I want? What is the space I want to carve out in this genre for myself? And who do I want to write for? And I
Mm-hmm.
realized I wanted to write I want to write marginalized communities. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted primarily Black women, brown women. I wanted to write identities and experiences that we weren't seeing centered as much in romance. Like I have a heroine who has lupus. I wanted to write up, like you said, about grief, about depression. Not that no one is doing that because I'm not some unicorn, but I wanted to write things that mean something to me. And as a journalist, I feel like intellectual curiosity is a big part of that. And
Mm-hmm.
it comes over into my work as a romance novelist. Like I'm interested in the human condition. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people don't think that romance is the place to discuss that because a lot of people are dismissive of the genre. And a lot of people speak of it in very reductive terms.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, because romance is such a digestible genre, I always say it goes down easy. It is I mean, it's the most commercially successful genre. So there's more people reading romance actually than anything else. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, there is no better landscape to have like difficult conversations because with romance, you're always going to have a happily ever after. You're always assured joy. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel very safe having difficult conversations, having maybe conversations that people would have avoid challenging, even in the context of
Mhm.
a love story, because we're guaranteed joy. I am fine like digging into hurtful experiences because you're guaranteed joy, and in real life you're not. For me, I don't see my romance, what I do, I don't see it primarily as escaping from life. I see it as a portal into life. And what I mean by
Mm.
that is a reflection of what people are actually going through. I want it to be
Right.
real. I want it to at times feel raw, but I want readers to feel safe. And so I always say I don't see it as an escape from life. I see it as a portal into life. I see it as, I think about it as, if you think about a comedian,
Mhm.
especially a good someone who's really good at satire, they're up there talking, you're laughing, and then they say something and you're like, whoa, okay, we're talking about some real stuff. Like your guard has been lowered and you're
Mhm.
laughing and you're open, and all of a sudden there's this like gut punch of truth. And you
Mhm.
weren't, okay, I didn't expect that conversation here, this comedy thing, but we're here now. And I find that I'm open.
Yep.
I see romance as a Trojan horse to smuggle in discourse.
Mhm.
And that won't be for everybody. Some people are going to be like, I want it to be fluffy. I want it to be light. And I'm like, there are people who do that. Read them.
Yes.
That's not what I
Yes.
do, and it's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, you're saying so much in all of that. And I think that people can genuinely connect with your work when they're able to see themselves
Yeah.
in some regard in
Mhm.
your characters,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that vulnerability in life is hard to it's hard to be vulnerable and share these different aspects of your life and yourself with others when out of all the fears that come along with being vulnerable, right? And getting to see your characters live out their vulnerabilities and people getting to see how what that looks like
Mhm.
and even though it's fiction, it
Yes.
feels like there's still that human connection
Yes.
and it's grounded in real truth
Yes.
and real stories and like things that so many of us are dealing with.
Mhm.
So the other thing that you have talked about is self love
Mhm.
and romantic love and friendships and how they all matter equally in your
Yeah.
stories. I
Mhm.
think this can be true for so many of us in our own real lives, like we just talked about. So, can you share why this is so important to you?
Yeah, I think that especially as a romance writer, the expectation is that you're going to center romance, like a love story. And of course that's
Hmm.
always there. Because I don't want people to feel, tricked. They come into this expecting a romance and it's like there's no romance. So, and I love romance. Like I'm a romance writer and a romance
Hmm.
reader. So I love romance. But I do feel like in culture sometimes we emphasize romantic love to the neglect
Mm.
of platonic love, to the neglect of sisterhood and friendship. And those, I think, in a healthy life are constants as well.
Hmm.
Sometimes those are the most constant, like you could have 2 3 divorces and have your same friend group through all of it. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean.
so it's like we sometimes are encouraged, even subliminally, to neglect, to overemphasize romantic love, like, why aren't you married? Or you're still single, or you're not going to have kids, or there are these constructs of what
Hmm.
a successful, happy life looks like. And I think
Hmm.
more and more there are women who say, well, that's not actually what, and, I write happily ever afters, in romance. There are women who say, well, that's not actually my happily ever after. I don't ever want to get
Right.
married, or I don't ever, the heroine I just wrote about, I don't ever want to have kids.
Right.
I still deserve joy. I still deserve a happily ever after in a romantic relationship. But at the same time, a lot of women are getting married later. The heroine that I just wrote about, she's 40 years old. She's not married and she is not pressed.
Mhm.
She is building this big life for herself. I
Mhm.
love heroines who they're like, whether I'm I'm in a relationship or not, there's a wholeness to me, where I am whole, not in a way that's like that's isolating or completely self-centered, but I'm very much concerned with my own soul. I'm very much concerned with my mind and with my goals and with my dreams, and making sure that I am building something that I'm proud of and that feels whole and fulfilling, even whether or not I have a romantic partner. And friends and family are a really big part of that. And so I wrote a book called This Could Be Us, which is the second book in the Skyland series. And obviously it's a romance, but the heroine dates herself for over half the book. And so people are like, how is this a romance? She's dating herself, And of course there is a romantic lead, but she's coming out of a really difficult divorce. And I really wanted to depict that we as women, sometimes we just need to be by ourselves. Sometimes we need to heal. And I always say that if you know and get to know ourselves and spend time with our own thoughts and our own feelings and our own beliefs, before we attach to someone else. Because a lot of times when we haven't spent time doing that, when we do get involved with someone, not everybody, but sometimes we're molded into a shape. We are molded into something that maybe isn't our dreams, maybe doesn't line up with our goals or our ambitions or what our idea of our life looks like. I love women who say, I want to set that and I want to be clear about that before I find a romantic partner, because it's not about not compromising to be with someone, because you're married. There's a lot of compromise. There's a lot of give and take, but there's something different about someone asking you to be fundamentally different than who you are, or to compromise something that is core to who you are. That's not healthy.
No.
And so
And
women who know who they are and they've spent time with their thoughts and their beliefs and their dreams, when they come to that, they're like, oh, wait a minute, you're asking me to do something that is fundamentally, antithetical to who I am and to what I want my life to look like.
right.
So, I think there's a wholeness to life beyond romantic partnership.
I obviously I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so I really wanted to touch on that because I think it's so important that people understand that the wholeness that you feel in your life, it is going to be made up of so many different parts.
Yes.
And I was talking to my husband about this last night, exactly this same thing that you were talking about women and what women are seeking and what the relationship landscape looks like, and how women have more control and they have more say and they have more dreams and aspirations and goals and things that they're working towards outside of the idea that success means finding a partner and having children. Like, that's great, but for some people they don't even want that. I have so many friends who don't want children, or so many friends who don't want marriage and don't want a relationship.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to really value the holistic human experience, which includes friendship. It includes self-love. And if you don't love yourself prior to or during or entering into a relationship, it's going to be really tricky to love your relationship.
Yes.
Because I was talking to my husband about this last night too. A lot of people don't really think of a relationship as a separate thing from themselves.
Yes.
They think of like a lot of people attribute a relationship to who they are rather than something that is a part of their life.
Yes.
And I think that really gets us in a bit of a pickle sometimes because we put so much expectations on our relationship to provide us with a lot of the things that we need, like companionship, friendship, laughter, fun, love, challenges and mystery. Like, there's so much that we're putting on the relationship that we need to be taking ownership for ourselves and
Yeah.
creating those things for ourselves, and our relationship is like a bonus, right?
Yeah.
We are who we are, and then there's our relationship that allows us to be who we are in that relationship. And yeah, there are
Right.
sacrifices and there are
Right.
things that you have to compromise on, but the goal is to have a whole sense of self
Yes.
and love yourself first, and incorporate all these different aspects into your life: friendship, family,
Hmm.
love, romance, and
Hmm.
relationship.
Yeah.
So I really I thank you for sharing that, and it's so on point with what it means and what it is to have a healthy,
Yes.
relationship. There's all of
Yeah.
these things are equally important.
Yes.
So
And I,
yeah.
I I think it's in line with what you're saying, because I think it puts undue pressure on your partner to expect this, all these dimensions of your existence to be completely realized in this one person. That
Right.
it's undue and it's unfair and it's unhealthy, and
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 you're
it all,
setting yourself up for
yes,
disappointment, and
yes,
you're setting your partner up for failure.
yes. Yes, and it's like, oh, this marriage or this relationship feels like a failure because everything I need is not in this person when it was never supposed to be.
Right.
I hope that. And the thing is, like, when you're building this big life, whatever, and I'm not talking about big like you need to be on TV or you need to be whatever. When I say big, it's like the biggest way you can think about your dreams, like as big as you can think and as big as you want to live, and whatever thriving looks like for you, figuring that out and pursuing that, whether you have a romantic relationship or not. And then when you find that partner who is fit to you and who you are fit to, it's like, okay, now we share this. It's not something that I'm expecting you to give me. I have been cultivating something. I've been creating a life and an existence that is amazing. And I hope you have too. And now we
Right.
get to share that with each other, and we get to walk beside each other. And I think so many times in a patriarchal culture, in a patriarchal society, which is what we live in, even now, in the year of our Lord, 2025, we're still in a patriarchal culture. And there's so many times that we as women, even subconsciously, we subjugate our ambitions and our dreams and our goals, for in service to our partners, and so there are so many things that are built into the system. Even having children, it can, in corporate spaces especially, slow down your career path, slow down, your goals. We absorb that, even, statistically, and I'm sure you know this, statistically, even when you have a partner who is quote unquote sharing the load, we as women oftentimes end up absorbing an inordinate amount of responsibility for the home, for our kids. So, like, we exist in a patriarchal culture that is constantly informing us that maybe we shouldn't be thinking about ourselves first, or we shouldn't be taking care of ourselves before we take care of everything else. And one thing I really learned as a special needs mom is that I can't, if I am not taking care of myself, there's nothing. Like, I have so little left to take care of my son, who needs so much. And when my son first got his diagnosis, parents who are much further along in their special needs journey were like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like, pace yourself, take care of yourself, because my son's condition is it's it's lifelong. So this is not going anywhere, and I want to be my best self for him and for my husband and for myself. And I think so much
Yes.
of that is creating all of those dimensions in your life where you're getting fed and you're getting watered from all these different places, so that you can be what you need to be to your friends, to your family, to your husband, to your kids. So yeah.
You know, I I feel like we can go on and on, but while we're on this subject, I want to talk about your new book, Can't Get Enough, because one of the primary things that I wanted to touch on is the fact that the main character
Mhm.
is caring for a
Mhm.
parent
Yeah.
who has Alzheimer's, which
Yeah.
is, when I think of this, I think of so many people right now. For me, because we're part of that sandwich generation where we're caring for our parents, we're caring for our children.
Yes.
Our parents are aging, and with age comes a lot of these different challenges and health challenges that we become kind of responsible for, right? And so I that really struck a chord with me as I'm going through my journey with my aging parents and
Mhm.
trying to help care for them and all of their needs. And then I listened to you talking about being the caregiver to your son
Yeah.
over all these years and taking the importance of taking care of yourself so that you can then pour into others.
Mhm.
So obviously, I know that you probably have drawn some inspiration from
Mhm.
that. But was there anything else that that you drew inspiration
Yeah.
from your own personal life in regards
Yeah.
to the character, and why did you think it was important to add that dynamic to this story?
Yeah, one of the big hallmarks of what I think of as my brand as a storyteller is that I
Mm-hmm.
want people who don't often see their experiences depicted in fiction
Ooh.
to see themselves on page. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why, like I mentioned, I have a heroine who has lupus, and I have, like I deal with chronic illness, and I deal, all these different things that a lot of people are experiencing. But when you
Mm-hmm.
open fictional novels, sometimes it's like when you open it, sometimes that's not there, and not that
Mm-hmm.
it has to be in everything, but there's something that is so gratifying and amazing about reading a novel and seeing your own experience reflected. And I know that there are so many people, like you said, we're in that generation that is happening to so many people that I know. I
Mm-hmm.
have several friends who have parents who have Parkinson's, who have Alzheimer's, some form of dementia. And a lot of them are in other states, and their parents don't want to move, and their lives and their families and their jobs and other places. And they are
Mm-hmm.
literally going back and forth between states on a regular basis. It's a lot. And then for
Mm-hmm.
me, my grandmother, and I mentioned this in the author's note of Can't Get Enough, my grandmother was diagnosed with dementia. And as she deteriorated, it's ironic. I don't know if ironic is the best word, but I turned Can't Get Enough in, which of course depicts Alzheimer's. And my grandmother passed away from complications of dementia literally the week after I turned in the book.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I definitely have my own experience with this. My mom and my aunt became her primary caregivers. And so I watched what it takes. So much of what we see depicted in Can't Get Enough is drawn from that. But I'm a journalist at heart. So every book I
Mm-hmm.
write, the first thing I do is drop a subject list. A subject list that means who am I going to talk to who's navigating these lived experiences. So I actually interviewed, in addition to like reading books and research and data and all that stuff. I love talking with people who are actually living with this. So I interviewed a lot of people who are
Mm-hmm.
caregivers for loved ones who have Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. And
Mm-hmm.
I think seeing my mom and my aunt navigate it was a real inspiration for me.
Yep.
And incorporating it, I didn't realize, I think, how impactful it was going to be until people started getting the book and reading the book. And I'm getting all of these DMs and messages about people saying,
Yes.
I was sobbing, I was crying in the prologue, where, we kind of, I don't want to do spoilers, but it's kind of when you first realize what Hendrix, the main character, is dealing with her mom,
Mm-hmm.
because her mom is lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty common, and
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of started with that. But there were so many experiences that in those interviews that really informed how I shaped this depiction of Alzheimer's and these characters. So yeah, it's been. I've had people who say I read the prologue and I had to stop reading, because this is
Mm.
exactly what I'm going through right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm very careful about content warnings and trigger warnings. So right
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, it's not like spoiling the book, but I feel a responsibility as someone who is writing into those very real, raw, lived experiences like grief, like depression, like, all of these real lived experiences. I'm like, it is fiction, but somebody's living it right now. It is fiction, but it is going to look like a mirror to a lot of people. And some people aren't ready to see that. And so I
No.
always try to do content and trigger warnings at the beginning to say, okay, this is what we're going to be talking about. If you're not in the right head or heart space to handle that right now, maybe just put the book aside or go into it with giving yourself grace. Like if it feels like it's too much of an emotional strain, okay, I feel fine putting this book down, or I'm gonna buddy read this book with someone. I've had a lot of people say, I am, as soon as I read the prologue, I reached out to a friend and was like, this book might be difficult for me. Would you buddy read? So I have several books like that. So
Yeah.
it's been impactful to have people reach out and
Yes.
talk about that.
That's a beautiful word to describe that, is just the impact that this story and your characters have on all of the readers. And I think it's what you've been able to accomplish is truly wonderful. Again, I feel like the vulnerability of the characters and your own vulnerabilities, because I know so much of this is drawn from your own personal experiences and you sharing your just the dynamics and what it feels like in putting that on the page for everyone else to kind of experience and see a little bit of themselves in that, I think is been really wonderful. I want to get some closing thoughts from you, but I also want to know what you feel like what's is the biggest myth about relationships that you hope your stories help to dismantle.
I think I don't know if it's relationship specifically, but I'm always thinking about women. When I'm mainly thinking about women when I'm writing
Yep.
romance. And I always say that people are like, how do you build your characters? I usually am thinking about an experience, and then I'm like, who's the best person to tell this story? And it's, usually a woman. And then I say, and now I'm going to build if it's a male and if it's a man and a woman, now I'm going to build the man who deserves her, who's worthy of her. I think the thing that I don't know if it's a myth, but I think it's a lie that culture tells us as women sometimes. And the thing I counter it with is like never settle. I think sometimes culture tricks us into believing that we have to settle for someone who doesn't love us the way we deserve, doesn't love us, doesn't respect us, isn't loyal to us, isn't esteeming our dreams and our goals as important as theirs. And I think that is the myth that I'm constantly coming up against, is the myth or the lie that you have to compromise what you think you deserve to have this idea that people have of what that life is supposed to be, which is married with kids and all of those things. So I'm expected to compromise what I believe I deserve just to have a husband or just to have a
Right.
wife, so that I can get this ideal, which may not even be, fit for how you're made or what you want. So I think that's the lie that I'm always attacking in my work is women, you deserve, more. And a lot of people, especially men, will say romance just gives you these unrealistic expectations. Like people say that to me all the time. And I understand what they mean, but I think what a lot of people miss is that when a lot of women are reading romance, it's not like, ooh, there's a billionaire. Ooh, look, there's someone who's listening to me. Oh, look, there's someone who respects me. Oh, look, there's someone who's going to be faithful to me. Oh, look, there's someone who believes that I deserve, happiness and my dreams accomplished and my goals fulfilled as equally as they do. Look, that's that. And people sometimes miss that's the fantasy. We are in a culture that is so respect deprived that we feel like that is a fantasy, that someone would listen
It's
to you, that someone would respect you. That I'm like, that is not that is basic. That's
right.
basic. But it
Right.
feels for so many women like a fantasy because there are so many people who have convinced them they don't deserve that or that they should not expect it. And that's where it's like, oh, these are unrealistic expectations. Maybe it is unrealistic to expect you would have like a billionaire, some of they'd be flying you and, be on yachts, whatever. But it's not unrealistic to expect the way these women are being treated in my work. And that's the lie that I am constantly, I hope, deconstructing, that culture is constantly feeding us.
Yes. I I hear you on that. And I know that it's so important for women to aspire to
Mhm.
and to get the things that they do deserve.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of your characters, your male characters, tend
Mhm.
to be very emotionally
Yes.
evolved and
Yes.
emotionally intelligent and
Yes.
multidimensional and all the things that are really high up on so many of our wish lists for
Yes.
what we're looking for in a partner. And I think it's really great to show women what that looks like because
Mhm.
like you said, we so much of what we're getting fed through whatever means social media,
Yeah.
public opinion, whatever the case may be, can sometimes feel like that is not attainable or that's not achievable.
Yeah.
And regardless of what that narrative is, it shouldn't change that your belief in that you deserve it.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think it's really great, and it is unfortunate that we see that
Mhm.
as fantasy, like that type
Yeah.
of partner is like a fantasy, but no, it's not. And it sounds like
No.
you're living proof of that, as
Yeah.
am I.
Yes.
And so it's good to see that reflected in your work.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's kind of a thing that I've seen more with this book even. I've had so many women say, I was listening to Can't Get Enough, and by chapter 3 or by the end of the book, I'd broken up with my boyfriend. And I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I'm like not trying to break up happy homes. What's going on? And they're like, no, but I realized I was settling. I realized that I was in this relationship because I thought I couldn't do any better, or because I thought that no one would love me. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing a woman who is being loved properly made me realize, oh, I'm settling for this because I think there's no one else.
Wow.
And it's so funny when people say that, because I'm like, I wasn't thinking that would be
Not my
a
intention.
side effect, a byproduct. My assistant was like, "Girl, I got to chapter 3 and I broke up with my boyfriend." I was like, "Oh, wait! I wasn't thinking that was going to happen." She's like, "No, honey, he was," and I was like,
It
"Okay."
needed to
Right.
happen. It
She
needed to
knew.
happen.
That's the thing. She knew. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like these people who are telling me this is not like they were out, like, oh my gosh, I'm ecstatic in this relationship and it's giving me
Mm-hmm.
everything I need. No, they were in relationships that were stale, or that were not
Mm-hmm.
serving them, or that weren't centering or esteeming them. And they already knew that. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing it depicted, even fictionally, told them, okay, yeah, no, it's nowhere near that. I don't get this at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm. It
so
was
I'm,
just the last little.
yes,
I
nudge.
always say, like, I'm always looking for a sign. And
Yes,
I trust and believe that, everything happens the way that it's meant to happen.
yeah,
And I do not see everything as coincidence. I'm always searching for meaning and purpose. And
yes.
people are finding purpose to break up with their boyfriends that are no good for them from your book. And I think that's wonderful.
High five. I celebrate. I've
You're
talked about
getting the assist.
a lot of irritated boyfriends,
I
but
know. Can't get enough is getting the assist for a bunch of breakups and that need to happen. That need
yes,
to happen in
the ones that
2025.
need that. But you know what? It's so funny because I know we're getting to the end, but with Before I Let Go, which is a divorced couple who end up getting back together, but after lots of therapy,
Mm-hmm.
so many people were telling me, I had known that I needed to go to couples therapy, and I had never been able to convince my partner. And when I read Before I Let Go, I just handed them the book and said, read this.
Mm-hmm.
Or the depiction of depression, which I've been diagnosed with depression, is something that I live with. In the book, they're like, I could never really articulate what depression was like. I
Mm.
just gave the book to my friends or to my partner and said, this is what depression is like.
Wow.
Like, and so many people who are like, or some people are like, actually did divorce after this book because I realized we have not done the work to make this work. And if he or she is not willing to do the work, this is where we are. It is a very surreal experience to have people use something that you created fictionally to connect with real life decisions. Like people who say, after I read Before I Let Go, I called my insurance company to see if they would cover therapy. There is no greater metric for success, not sales, not lists, not awards. There's no greater metric for success to me than impact. And that's how I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to, is when something that I'm creating is connecting with people's real life decisions, when they're interrogating beliefs, when they're challenging things in their life that they're like, I'm not sure this is good. Like for me, that's a touchdown. That is the first and best metric of success.
I feel like that is, you got the assists, you've got the touchdowns, that wraps us all and brings us all together for closing, and it's like a mic drop moment.
Thank you so much for having
This
me.
has been so wonderful. Thank you so much. I do, before we leave, I like to play a little game called Do Tell.
Okay.
It's my conversation card game, and normally if you were here, I would hand you some cards to choose from, but I've selected a few questions that I'm going to randomly ask you one, and you can answer the questions. Very simple. Ooh, I kind of want to ask you this one. When was the last time you felt butterflies?
Oh, gosh. I have to think about this. I think I've been married 28 years, to the same guy, and he's pretty amazing.
Yes.
And I don't know if I would describe it as butterflies, like that fluttery feeling. I don't get that all the time. I can't remember exactly the last time, but I feel treasured. I feel treasured just about every day. My husband, the way he takes care of me, the way he considers me, the way he takes care of our son. And this is probably too much information. My husband never walks past me with a smacking my butt. And I'm like, babe, or grabbing. And I'm like, baby. And he's like, sorry, I can't help it. He tells me that all the time. So, and in the book, Can't Get Enough, the hero's nickname for the heroine is Gorgeous. And that's my husband's nickname for me. There's so many things that he does that make me feel, I won't say butterflies, but I say treasured. Like I feel precious to him all the time. And I hope I make him feel that way. Because he's constantly doing things that make me feel that way. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
I love that answer. I llove that for you. I love your husband. I'm so happy, and I'm so happy and proud of him for making you feel so treasured.
Yeah,
because you deserve it.
A good one. Yeah, he's a good egg. He's a keeper, obviously, since I've kept him for 28 years.
Yeah, 28 years is a long time. So congratulations
Thank you
on
so
that
much.
as well. This has been so wonderful. I was really excited to talk to you, and I think that you're a truly wonderful human, and I'm grateful for the work that you do, and it's great when there's vulnerability and people can see themselves in your work, and you can really help people and impact people the way that you do in such a positive way. So thanks for joining me on my little podcast here.
No, thank you for having me. I was really
And Can't Get Enough is out, New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
And if you have not read it or listened to it yet, do so, please. And anywhere we can get you can get your book anywhere like Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, wherever.
Yes, Audible, or anywhere you listen to audiobooks. It's anywhere.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Do Tell Relationship Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this episode, and leave us a comment as well. And lastly, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at thedotellpodcast@gmail.com or DM us at BeneXNina on Instagram. See you next week with another exciting guest.